Hey everybody, 26 years ago today, a guy named Jim Rome, previously fairly unknown to anyone unless of course you happen to listen to sports talk radio like I did, or listen to or watch ESPN and his Talk 2 show, I've seen it, basically said to his guest, then Los Angeles Rams quarterback Jim Everett, that he was going to call him Chris, because he'd been calling him Chrissy Everett. And Jim took offense and basically said, hey, look, you're going to stop doing that. The question is, first of all, why did Jim call Chris Everett, excuse me, Jim, see, there I go again, call Jim Everett Chris Everett, as in Chris Everett Lloyd, the tennis player, as in, hey, he's not a macho guy who can actually take a sack. He had to actually fall down in order to avoid getting hit. That was the implication. Why did he do that? Well, here's why. Because this is the game against the 49ers right here, where Jim Rome took what is now famously called the phantom sack. As you can see, he's back to throw, and he falls down and nobody's on him, okay? That basically set the tone for this now famous confrontation that occurred 26 years ago to this day. And you would say, okay, aside from the fact that it was sensational and all that, why do you present it? And I will explain to you that after I show you what transpired on the Jim Rome show on April 6th, 1994, 26 years ago. And here is that exchange.
Call me Chris Everett to my face one more time.
I already did it twice.
You call one more time. We better take a station break.
Well, it's a 5-minute segment, a 5-segment show. We got a long way to go.
Well, we do.
We got a long way to go.
We do.
I'll get a couple segments out of you.
It's good to be here with you, though.
Well, it's good to see you,
because
too.
you've been talking like this behind my back for a long
But
time.
now I said it right here.
Right, exactly.
Well, we got no problem with that.
I think that you probably won't say it again.
I bet I do.
Okay.
Chris?
Now, it is funny because, first of all, up to that point, Jim had gotten away with saying some really mean things in some cases, a number of cases, on his radio show about personalities. And in order to understand why he did that, and I'm not saying it was justified, but it is part of a time in media where the shock jock radio host was king. And the shock jock radio host is a person who basically says something to shock you. And he or she, the shock jock, is actually more, known or more referred to with respect to the actions of white male radio hosts at prime time slots, not necessarily prime time, but time slots that were best at capturing the 18 to 34-year-old demographic. Like, for example, the late Don Imus is one. And there are others, like, for example, there was the gentleman on 92.9 The Game that made fun of the ALS problem that the famous New Orleans Saints football player had. And there was, of course, you could put Rush Limbaugh in that category on occasion, and he's got the Medal of Honor. Go figure there, right? But there have been, of course, Howard Stern is another shock jock example. There are a number of shock jock examples that you could point to over the years who've shocked people and entertained people with their unique delivery. And Jim Rome was trying to capture that the ratings that come with that, because you don't know what that person is going to say next. You tune in basically watching for that thing that person might do, right? and it's generally to say, do or say to somebody else, and more often than not, you're not disappointed. Morton Downey Jr. was the king of shock jock television hosts and radio hosts, known for the mouth and the teeth. Okay, and he came in at a time during the 70s and the 80s and really paved the way for guys like Jim Rome. So I think Jim Rome, in getting his comeuppance by Jim Everett of the Rams, probably ushered in the end to the intensity of the shock jock radio affect. The last person on this, I remember I was talking about him earlier, and that was against Steve Gleason, who was the famous New Orleans Saints player who had and still battling ALS, and thank God is still alive and with us. And you had a group of guys that were on, three of them, and they all lost their jobs. They were running really well at 92.9 the game at the time until their mistake, and and they all got fired. All of them got canned in 2013 for their making fun of Steve Gleason with ALS. Steak Shapiro, Chris Domino, and Nick Cellini. I want to make sure I got their names right. And I wrote about it because when I first heard what they said in real time, I was in the car and I thought, what the heck did I just hear? What was this? And they had a show called Mayhem in the AM, which was the latest version of the kind of shock jockery that Morton Downey Jr. started, Howard Stern continued, Jim Rome tried to, and I think arguably has made a nice living from. But they tried that and wound up issuing this apology. It went like this. We deeply regret the offensive programming that aired this morning on Mayhem in the AM on 790 The Zone, Saints player related to former Saints player Steve Gleason and his battle with ALS. We suspended the three individuals involved immediately following their comments and have since terminated their employment. 790 The Zone, our owners, sponsors, and partners in no way endorse or support this kind of content. We sincerely apologize to Mr. Gleason, his family, and all those touched by ALS. And that was done just as social media was beginning to grow in its impact on our society. Neither of the gentlemen have regained the stature they once knew since then, although I have to give it to Steak Shapiro because he established a great local program on Atlanta restaurants that I haven't seen over the past year. I don't quite know what happened to it, but it was going great guns there for at least 4 years. 4 years. But I digress. Jim Rome established a formula that ran for a while, even after the Jim Everett incident. But I think what he really brought home was the ability to take a sports issue and distill it down to some great sound bites in a staccato delivery in a few seconds time. So you got what he was saying immediately. You got his take immediately. And you were able to go forward with your day. But remember, 26 years ago today, Jim Rome got the crap kicked out of him by Rams quarterback Jim Everett for calling him Chris, and launched his career. Jim Rome's, that is. Subscribe to Zenny62 on YouTube and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com.